Help capture the history of our markets by contributing to the John Lothian News GoFundMe campaign to support the Markets Wiki Education history-focused video series and more.
When I was younger, and especially in high school, I always worked in kitchens. So for me, I fell in love with cooking at a very young age. So I actually decided to go into culinary school. So I have a bachelor's degree from the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park with visions of being the next big chef. But back then, in the late 90s, 98, 99, the food world was a much different world than it is today. It wasn't as well known and as maybe more commercial as it is today. So that was my vision, is to become the next big chef. In my quest of becoming a big chef, I moved to Northern California, into the Oakland Bay Area, to live with some family and my aunt. And funny enough, as I was looking for employment in the restaurant business, she had a neighbor who was a manager on the options trading floor, on the Pecos trading floor, which was known back then. And that was in early 1999-ish. And so after chatting with the gentleman, Corey Arnold, who's a good friend, I took some tests, and I was actually hired by the exchange to be a market quote analyst. As I got into the world of option trading, it just was something that struck with me, that I really wanted to figure it out, right? I wanted to understand the complexities of why it was so important to understand the flows of liquidity, the changes in the Greeks, and I just wanted to complete that understanding. So within a few months, actually, there was an opportunity at a market making group called Spear, Leeds and Kellogg, SLK. And they had a big operation on the other markets at that time, in Amex and Philly and SIBO. And there was 4 people in San Francisco. And so I had an opportunity and was able to get interviewed and jump on that team as a clerk. So from there, I really started diving into that sort of quest of understanding what was actually happening on the trading floor during that time, and how crazy it was with, at that point in time, we were looking at, in 1999, we're looking at solely regionally quoted and regionally traded securities. So this was essentially, if you wanted to trade Microsoft, if you wanted to trade Juniper, if you wanted to trade Cisco, you would be going to San Francisco to trade that. And conversely, the same when Philly and Amex for those regionally listed names too. The Microsoft crowd had 30 to 40 guys in it. It was really packed on a bleacher stadium side. We were right next to that post, and we were in Shearing Plow and a handful of other healthcare names. And for me, it was really eye-opening to understand the dynamic qualities of how things were really being moved and traded at that time, especially given the regional nature of it. So that was a big eye-opener for me. The trading side, as others can say, is you dive into it with mock trading after the close, you dive into it with Nattenberg, you dive into it from a more academic standpoint. Any which way you could possibly learn, you had to really absorb the capabilities so that you could really understand how to make it sort of essentially and learn to trade effectively. People were wearing baseball hats with Y2K all over them. The Y2K at the exchange at that time, you had firm believers that trading systems were not going to be up and running. So the exchanges were very concerned, and they had a high level of concern for making sure that their systems were certainly going to be operational come January 1 of 2000 after the shift. But yes, in San Francisco and in the dot-com area of time of the market, as well as on the trading floor, it was certainly a very serious effort that I know the exchanges took with extreme caution, and they held lots of meetings after the close with all of the market participants to be ready and testing for Y2K. But yes, that was a big pivotal time. People were very concerned with decimalization and demutualization or non-exclusive trading, essentially from a concern on liquidity and the size of spreads basically narrowing, and overall the concerns of being able to support that level of client order flow after these major changes. So just talking about decimalization for a moment, overnight the exchanges actually had to change their software and their technology to be able to shift to decimalization. That's not an easy task. In the exchange core keyboards, when I was at the exchange as a market quote analyst, essentially we had to know and you knew the fraction decimalization equivalent to be able to put them on the screens effectively. Late 99 and early 2000, when we heard this new exchange was coming on board, everybody couldn't believe a fully electronic exchange was going to be launched. Now, Gary Katz and David Krell are amazing folks. I know, John, you've done lots of great articles on them. They've really had a true pioneering model of offering a pro rata based model, but in a full electronic capability across all lot sizes. So back in the day, I think it was called Raise and SIBO, and Philly had their own, but anything that was less than 10 contracts would go automatically for an execution in their order book for an execution based on which market makers were on the wheel at that point in time. Originally, that was only 10 contracts back in the day, and then you would essentially sort of try to be able to adjust that to 20, and then we switched to 30, then we switched to 50 contracts, so that anything greater than 50 contracts, a floor broker would be able to get on their book, and they would be running into the crowd to represent that order. But if you think about it now, ISE didn't have that model. ISE was a straight electronic exchange, obviously no floor broker interface, and it was a true, like I said, a pioneering model in many ways. Because also at that time, we did not have Reg NMS or the protected quote or BestX. They didn't have obligations to be able to stream the other markets' quotes. So you could trade one market at one price and another market at a different price, and there was no protection, unfortunately, not until the linkage came along a few years later. Morgan Stanley actually was intending to create a specialist on the P Coast as the first automated market-making specialist on the trading floor. So a close colleague of mine at SLK Hall, Pat Hickey, and I were hired over to Morgan Stanley to be specialists for their Morgan Stanley LMM automated market making specialist unit. So in 2003, I moved over to Morgan Stanley. And like I said, that was a ginormous leap because at the time we had procured a set of specialist symbols that were being babysat by our Wolverine partner, Kurt Eckert, at the time. And the entire crowd was resting with his crowd until we got up and running. And what that meant was we had a lot of significant technology at play coming from New York, going into San Francisco. Our volatility surfaces and our curves were all generated from New York. However, we had the ability to be able to adjust those based on real trading that was happening at that time, and significantly bigger trades that were being provisioned with the price discovery process from the floor brokers that were happening on a daily basis. So it was an interesting shift because we really catapulted from a manual, going back from my market quote analyst days, from a manual updating your markets on an individual basis to starting to utilize the Hull technology under Blair Hull's technology, to then moving over to a fully automated specialist post through Morgan Stanley. And we had an open bridge with the team in New York, so they could hear everything that was happening on the trading floor, all of the colorful language, all of the big trades. And it also really connected us together, because if we were to have technology issues, we could hear firsthand from the team in New York what was occurring, so we could better basically protect ourselves on the trading floor if we needed to be able to make those manual overrides to our volatility surfaces. In 2006, we actually, the exchange passed guidelines to be able to support specialists' capabilities remotely. So we were now going to be a remote specialist for Morgan Stanley right before I moved to Bank of America, BAML. And in 2006, they moved myself and in 2007, Pat, back to the Morgan Stanley New York office and the home office. And before I moved to Merrill Lynch, I was actually given the opportunity to take myself and our technology, and we were pushed on the other side of the automated market making wall into our single name trading desk. And what that really helped, and what that intended to do, was we knew our market making capabilities and technology was superior to help unwind risk. And once you knew essentially the areas of your book that you needed to ensure that you were risk reducing or possibly taking on a new position in certain areas, you could fine tune that based on our trading platform. So with the knowledge of my background in market making and automated market making, along with our technology, I dispersed myself and I tried to utilize, tried to give essentially our technology capabilities to the single name trading desk on the Morgan Stanley side on the fifth floor, and also to the index dispersion desk. And technology is difficult, right? It's not as an easily acceptable. People have limited screen space, limited PC space on their desktops. So it really was more of a challenge to have folks take on and learn sort of a newer technology. But in the index dispersion space, that proved to be very beneficial. So I work very closely with the index traders and to help deploy essentially this technology to help them reduce their index positions and their entire derivative book. And they were utilizing that technology all along. Along that way, I wanted to understand single name trading more in detail. So I was able to take on a smaller book essentially on the single name trade desk, because the liquidity provisioning on the single name trading desk is much different than a market maker. Market makers are very reactive. We understand real-time risk. We get lots of small lot contracts based on our quotes that we send out on the screen, whereas single name trader desks, of course, they utilize a much more broader position seeking, delta seeking or vega seeking term in trading. So you needed to have conviction with a certain area or a certain stock that you're looking to trade as a single name, whereas the market making side, you were just trying to balance a lot of quoting and a lot of little things overall. It wasn't as heavy in one space. So after I was on the trade desk, I was actually picked up by the electronic trading team upstairs, which was client-facing. So I moved under Morgan Stanley Electronic Trading, or MSET, and now I started learning to have a client-facing role and starting to talk to institutions and hedge funds. And we were trying to essentially sell the electronic trading capabilities of Morgan Stanley in the option space, as well as the equity space. So it was my first dive into equity algorithms, what they were doing, why they were important, how they were being used, why, essentially what was it that people were looking for, and to kind of understand my background to that point. I understood why traders would need certain trading algorithms on the option side, but for equities, it was a brand new world, and also on futures too. We had a solid futures business back then too. So it was an eye-opener to be able to be first covering clients, talking to these institutions, what was important to these long-only shops and hedge funds, and how they essentially source liquidity, and it really led to a much more holistic relationship, right? It wasn't just with Morgan Stanley Electronic Trading, it was also a clearing side. It was also the ability to have stock loan capabilities. It was a much more wholesome relationship that forced you to really step out of your bounds and learn and understand the other components of the company that these clients were really utilizing to be able to take on as many possibilities and quality-based strategies that they could employ. Tim was certainly one of them when I really shifted from on-floor trading and market making in the crowds and hearing what was happening and how that affected my positions to much more of an automated sense. So really shifting that electronic understanding of technology and support to how that impacted your book was a really big change for me in an automated market making side. So I learned a ton from Tim Brennan along the way. Pat Hickey and John Wirtz also are key mentors for me. We've stayed friends and connected for a very long time. Futures and options are very similar. So for me, I understood futures. I was on the equity electronic and option electronic trading team at Bank of America, Merrill. And for me, I could see how the constructs of an algorithm worked for equities. Although I generally knew the market structure, I didn't know it as well as I did options. And I had a sense of trading futures as well while I was trading. So for me, understand the constructs of the equity algorithms and then placing really the futures, say, CME model or ICE model on top of it with those contracts, how they varied in their allocation, how they varied in their matching capabilities was a natural fit. And I became close partners with the global futures team. So for me, I had sort of two tracks. I supported and held the position of algorithm head of development for the global futures team in close coordination with the global futures business. But it was based on the same architecture and technology in the equity algorithm team, which I was actually part of. So we were able to really branch out and bring that to a cross-asset capability. And with a dynamic 24/6 trading capability, it really pushed our technology to expand beyond just obviously US market hours to support Europe and Asia. However, that was really my first entry and connection with the regulatory oversight of MiFID, and also within Hong Kong and the Asian exchanges. The amount of global governance that needs to occur to support an algorithm trading business is significant, and it's also dynamic. So you had to stay very close with your compliance peers in the regions. You had to stay very close with the dynamic changes in how things were developing on those markets specifically, because guidance would come out and you would need to ensure that was taken into account within the algorithm side. So I took the construct of the equity algo suite. We added in the global futures products, and then we took the nuance of the regional capabilities from those regions, and by partnering with those folks. So it definitely requires a 24/6 type of job to be able to support those businesses. It was fun. It was really fun to be a part of. I still have very close friends in the futures team. I noticed that there was a position here at the NYSE that was open, and it really sort of fit my profile from an options standpoint, and I was very interested. So I came in and chatted with Ivan and the team here, and I had the opportunity to be able to take this great position on, and I'm very grateful and lucky for it. Right, if you think about 22 years ago when we started talking about how I became into this business as a market maker on the trading floor in San Francisco. Fast forward now to today, it's really sort of like a coming home kind of environment for me and experience for me, because when I go out to San Francisco, I still see a lot of the same folks that I have built very solid relationships with in the past that are still there across the exchange and the market participant side and the brokerage side. And here on the Amex, trading continues to be an extremely important part on the trading floors specifically and electronically. But on the trading floors, as you see here, I'm on the New York Stock Exchange trading floor. It continues to be a very big pivotal part of our business. Being able to find the ability to price discover and liquidity provision large size orders and more complex orders is a key asset that the manual trading capability and the teams on the trading floors do very well. And that, if I were to be asked the same question in 2005, 2006, when I was leaving the trading floor, there was 500 people when I first started. There was 50 people left on the trading floor when I left in 2006. But in my mind, I thought maybe perhaps we were moving away from them. But as you can see, it's definitely well alive and very fundamental to our industry, continues to be. So for me, moving over to the NYSE from the trading floor perspective was like coming home. And also from my technology, curiosity, and innovation side, my strategic product development side, that really is in my wheelhouse for our current project. As I mentioned, we're moving our options exchanges, first in ARCA in November and Amex in 2022, to our pillar trading system. And we're taking the opportunity to take a step back, look at our landscape of what we have, what we've heard from our clients, to understand what key components are important for them, and what potential fundamental shifts that we should be looking at that can help them in the future in our new trading system. So we have a big advantage in understanding where we want to be going. So not often are we sitting in front of a whiteboards of sorts, building out a trading system. And the last year and a half of our work so far has been much of that. And we've taken a lot of the time to be able to do significant client outreach in certain areas so that we can make sure we're shaping this the way we need it to be for the future. The pillar trading system, is a well-known trading system across our equity markets. So all of our 5 equity exchanges at the NYSE have already migrated over to pillar. So for us, it's the last two, our 2 options markets moving over, which is a significant move for us, and we're looking forward to having a very highly deterministic, low latency platform for our electronic, and also redefining our open outcry trading floors with a more flexible interaction for our floor brokers and our market participants on the trading floors in both markets across ARCA and Amex when we get there. So it's really kind of, for me, it's been a wonderful experience so far. I've been here for a year and a half. It's going to be 2 years in October. So I'm excited to be part of the team here and really kind of bring in a lot of my experiences in the past and where I've driven to today.
John Lothian News would like to thank those individuals who have contributed to our Markets Wiki Education GoFundMe campaign. Their financial assistance allows us to produce and distribute videos like this for our Open Outcry Traders History Project or the Path to Electronic Trading video series. Join them in supporting John Lothian News, capturing the history of our industry.